This program documents a factual homicide investigation and contains graphic imagery. Viewer discretion is advised. Previously on Murdermind, the detective faced a grisly discovery that stood in stark contrast to the situation 30 minutes prior. The investigation centered on the mysterious disappearance of a young woman named Shaquila Weatherspoon. Detective Tom O'Neill arrived as the team discovered a body. He noted that the husband, 30-year-old Roy McKenna, reported her missing. Authorities questioned whether their Friday night confrontation had devolved into physical assault. The husband maintained that no physical violence occurred during their dispute. Research into the couple's past revealed a troubling history, suggesting McKenna harbored a volatile and dangerous side. A brutal slaying, cryptic evidence, and the pursuit of a killer. Murdermind is hosted by retired Atlanta homicide detective Vince Velasquez. The status of the Shaquila Weatherspoon disappearance was officially reclassified as a homicide investigation. Although the detective lacked forensic confirmation regarding the identity of the badly decomposed remains, the circumstantial evidence pointed directly to Shaquila, and the team proceeded under that dark assumption. In discussions with Detective O'Neill, it became clear that Roy McKini was the central person of interest. O'Neill uncovered multiple police reports detailing a chronic history of domestic abuse involving McKini and his wife. In March of 1999, Shaquila summoned police after an argument resulted in her husband striking her. McKenna vanished before the patrol arrived, though he was later apprehended and booked on battery charges. Just 1 year later, law enforcement was summoned back to the residence for another disturbance. Shaquila alleged an assault following her refusal of his sexual advances, yet she ultimately declined to pursue legal action. At this stage of the inquiry, Roy McKini appeared to be a textbook suspect. The investigator noted that where there is a history of turmoil, there is usually guilt, despite a limited criminal record. The suspect insisted he was not a career criminal, claiming to understand the nature of the inquiry. Records from an interview with O'Neill and Meadows showed they interrogated McKini directly regarding his violent past. He confessed to 2 prior battery charges involving his wife. The detectives pressed him on whether these physical altercations were a recurring theme in the marriage. He was vague about the timeline, suggesting the incidents occurred approximately 5 or 6 years ago. The suspect also admitted to a prior charge for the possession of marijuana. Investigators pivoted back to the violence, asking if police had visited the home more recently than he claimed. He eventually conceded that law enforcement had been called within the last 2 years. The evidence established a clear and consistent pattern of aggression toward his spouse. In the world of homicide, it is common for domestic abusers to eventually cross a lethal threshold. Velasquez questioned whether this specific case followed that tragic and predictable psychological trajectory. A seasoned detective must evaluate every possibility, beginning with the most logical and statistically probable theories. Motives often crystallize when investigators scrutinize those within the victim's immediate social circle. The team looked for friction with neighbors or colleagues that might suggest an outside threat. Every potential conflict, from secret relationships to family disputes, remained a viable lead for the detectives. Currently, the only tangible lead was the record of abuse, leaving her other personal connections a mystery. The investigative strategy required vetting the inner circle before expanding the search to more distant acquaintances. Certainly, the suspect portrayed himself as a flawed man who nonetheless prioritized his family's welfare above all else. Investigators found it unusual that McKini was so forthcoming about his history of striking his wife. Typically, individuals under suspicion for murder go to great lengths to conceal any history of domestic volatility. Most suspects attempt to bury such damaging information to avoid drawing police scrutiny. McKini used his admission of past mistakes as a tool to appear honest and distance himself from the murder. He pleaded with the authorities to find his wife, claiming he was incapable of doing her grave harm. One can only pray for her safety. The focus now shifts to a meticulous breakdown of the interrogation involving Roy McKini and investigators O'Neill and Meadows. In this phase of the chronology, Shaquila remains a missing person. Her location is a haunting void. The detectives are operating in the dark, unaware of the crucial evidence unearthed during the parallel inquiry. They approach Roy McKenna with the professional courtesy afforded to a grieving spouse. Yet Sergeant Meadows' skepticism is already beginning to simmer beneath the surface. The investigator insists on a deliberate pace, urging the subject to reflect carefully before speaking. Apologies are offered as the priority shifts toward establishing an unshakable factual foundation. The interrogation tightens. The detective demands precision regarding the exact hour he finished his shift. These pointed inquiries are standard procedure. In domestic disappearances, the inner circle is always the primary focus of scrutiny. O'Neill maintains a calm, calculated demeanor, while Meadows employs a more aggressive, high-pressure tactic to rattle the subject. Understood. He allegedly utilized his brother's vehicle to transport his child to the grandmother's residence, where she had been staying since Friday. The subject offers a flat, immediate denial. Tensions mount as investigators closely monitor Roy McKinney's nonverbal cues for signs of deception. The goal is to identify logical fallacies and pick apart any contradictions within his narrative. They are searching for deviations from the initial account provided at the start of the session. An innocent man should have no cause for such visible agitation. The logic is clear and undeniable. Total transparency and a flood of details are usually the hallmarks of someone with nothing to hide. The investigation pivots to his whereabouts throughout Saturday, specifically his associates, as the psychological state of Roy McKini is scrutinized. Seated before two seasoned investigators, he recounts the alleged disappearance of his spouse. While detailing their marital history, a dark admission surfaces: a prior record of domestic violence. Intuition isn't proof. With Shaquila Weatherspoon still missing, the case lacks the physical evidence needed for an arrest. The investigators are methodically proceeding through standard protocols, checking boxes as they build their case. They probe with difficult inquiries, gauging his physiological responses and testing the internal consistency of his claims. When asked to submit to a lie detector test, he offers a stuttering mask of cooperation. This footage provides a rare, unvarnished look at the suspect's initial interactions with law enforcement. Observers can scrutinize every twitch of his frame and every inflection in his voice. One is left to judge for themselves whether his performance was that of a distraught husband or a man concealing a dark secret. Leveraging their prior rapport, O'Neill summoned McKenna to deliver the grim news. Remains had been located, and the identity appeared to be Shaquila's. The investigation must now focus its lens intensely on the victim's spouse. Before proceeding, a thorough forensic sweep of the shared residence is imperative to uncover hidden clues. Determining the site of the murder is critical, as the recovery location appears to be a mere disposal site rather than the primary scene. Statistically, should the husband be responsible, the marital home is the most probable site of the fatal encounter. Obtaining a search warrant requires presenting a judge with enough probable cause to justify the intrusion into Roy McKinney's private property. A compelling argument built on facts and circumstantial links must be presented to link McKini to the homicide. Such a warrant does not definitively prove guilt. However, given his violent history with the victim, the house likely contains the physical evidence needed to bind him to the crime. Once the documentation is laid out before the court, the judge finds the circumstantial evidence sufficient to warrant a reasonable suspicion of McKini's involvement in the killing. With the signed warrant in hand, the investigative team immediately moves to secure the McKinney residence. To ensure an unhindered search, it was vital that Roy McKini be removed from the premises. He was detained in an unmarked unit under supervision. Upon arrival, I saw him waiting in the passenger seat, watched by a fellow officer. Despite his confusion, I bypassed him entirely, focused solely on the secrets buried within the house. The priority was reconstructing the victim's final moments through physical evidence before re-engaging the primary suspect. His initial narrative was already on the record. The detective opted to review the files back at headquarters, deciding against a premature confrontation without a complete evidentiary profile. By filing the missing persons report, the husband assumed the role of the cooperative, grieving spouse. With the report officially logged, there was no immediate pressure to conduct an interview that could wait days or even weeks. A sweep of the residence focused on identifying potential instruments of death. The search prioritized biological traces, binding materials like adhesive tape, or indications of physical trauma. Despite searching for the missing fragment of Shaquila's nail, the interior appeared undisturbed and devoid of overt brutality. The premises lacked blood spatter or any damaged furnishings. Nothing within Roy McKinney's residence suggested a struggle had occurred, leaving the search yields effectively blank. This led to the working theory that the fatal encounter transpired at a secondary location. The domestic environment provided no forensic support for a violent crime occurring on-site. Yet, manual strangulation remained a possibility, a method of killing that often leaves the surroundings remarkably sterile. The absence of gore or debris did not necessarily negate the possibility of a lethal struggle. A lack of forensic evidence failed to exonerate the residence as a potential crime scene. It raised a chilling question. Was the site naturally clean, or had McKinn meticulously scrubbed it? Investigators processed financial documents and various receipts for further analysis. Ammunition was recovered without a matching firearm, though it was seized as a precautionary measure pending an official autopsy. Ultimately, the residential search failed to produce a definitive, incriminating discovery. No singular piece of evidence emerged to bind McKenna directly to the slaying. This ambiguity was typical. Homicide cases rarely offer immediate clarity, requiring a more clinical patience. Success in such investigations often hinges on relentless persistence until a crack finally appears in the narrative. The following morning, a consultation with the medical examiner revealed the initial post-mortem findings. Fingerprint analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Shaquila Weatherspoon, though the technical distinction between cause and manner of death remained. The cause identifies the physiological end of life, be it asphyxiation, ballistics, or sharp force trauma. Manner serves as a legal classification, ranging from accidental to intentional homicide. Because of the advanced state of decay, the examiner could not pinpoint the exact physiological mechanism of her passing. The severe degradation of the remains initially suggested a prolonged exposure of several days. However, the doctor noted that extreme temperatures and local insect activity had drastically compressed the decomposition timeline. Forensic rulings often integrate the broader context of the criminal investigation. After reviewing the suspicious disposal of the body and the husband's questionable behavior, the detective voiced deep professional concerns. Taking those factors into account, the examiner classified the death as a homicide resulting from homicidal violence, a standard designation within Georgia's legal framework. The precise lethal act remained a mystery due to the significant loss of soft tissue. Still, the totality of the suspicious circumstances provided sufficient grounds to conclude it was a murder. It was during this period that a startling connection emerged. Shaquila was the cousin of a familiar fellow detective. Both had climbed the ranks together in 2000, one entering homicide while the other joined the robbery unit. The colleague had reportedly visited the scene but maintained a professional distance, avoiding any interference. Had his presence been noted at the time, the detective would have offered personal condolences while reassuring him of the department's commitment to the case. Yet, professional protocol would have required his removal to prevent any perception of an investigative conflict. The personal proximity to the victim was too great, and the state of the remains was not a memory a relative should carry. Some images are better left unseen to preserve the dignity of the deceased. While every case received the same unwavering dedication regardless of the victim's social standing, whether they were marginalized or prominent members of the community, the fact that she was kin to a brother in arms shifted the emotional weight of the investigation. The pursuit of justice for a colleague's family member made the mission feel significantly more personal. He had no intention of altering his established investigative methods. With 2 years in homicide, he had already seen the city's murder rate skyrocket to unprecedented levels. Though still honing his craft, several cases were already behind him, fueled by a raw, predator-like ambition. He felt adequately seasoned to navigate the complexities of such a grim investigation. He pressed forward, anchored by cold logic and a trail of evidence that refused to go cold. The official identification was delivered to Shaquila's mother, a duty that never loses its psychological weight. Little compares to the crushing burden of informing a father that his son will never return home. Whether it is a widow or a mother learning of her daughter's murder, the task remains agonizing. It stands as the most grueling responsibility within the realm of major crimes. This is a ritual to which no veteran investigator ever becomes truly desensitized. Scant leads forced a meeting with the victim's mother to dissect Shaquila's history and her ties to Roy McKini. Developing a deep victimology was the only hope for reconstructing the events of her final moments. Shaquila Weatherspoon was a devoted family pillar, juggling 2 jobs while raising her young daughter. She was the definition of resilience, a woman whose life revolved around an exhaustive work ethic. Leisure time was spent with friends or parenting, painting a picture of a loyal and dedicated soul. An exceptional daughter and mother, she commanded deep respect within her professional circles. Every detail uncovered thus far suggested Shaquila was nothing short of an exemplary individual. During the police interview, Roy McKenna appeared enamored, speaking highly of his wife's character. He spoke glowingly when investigators asked him to describe the woman he shared his life with. He described her as brilliant, sharp, and an outstanding mother to their child. While her mother confirmed her daughter's virtue, the detective sought the darkness beneath the surface. The investigation required a deeper dive into the husband's shadow, specifically Roy McKenna. Their history stretched back to high school, though beneath the bond lay a foundation of Roy's suffocating possessiveness. Constant accusations of infidelity haunted the relationship, yet the two remained inexplicably tethered. Frequent volatile conflicts did not stop them from cohabitating in a partnership defined by unsettling friction. Marriage and pregnancy followed, bringing domestic struggles that often mask more sinister tensions. Such common marital strife initially failed to register as a significant warning sign for the detective. While his public persona lacked overt aggression, the private reality behind closed doors remained a mystery. The mother rarely witnessed McKenna's darkness firsthand, knowing only the troubling anecdotes Shaquila chose to share. One harrowing account involved Roy losing control, nearly strangling Shaquila and leaving visible physical trauma. Fear of professional ruin kept her silent, as her law enforcement role forbade any domestic scandals. Her sheriff's department position meant any reported domestic incident would result in immediate termination. Roy McKenna sat firmly in the crosshairs until a revelation from the mother shifted the entire narrative. Next, on the Murdermind, evidence suggests Shaquila's life contained another man with a potentially lethal motive. Reports indicate a pattern of pathological jealousy. Support this investigation by engaging with the channel. Follow the case files across all major social media networks for further updates. Return for the upcoming installment as the psychological portrait of a killer deepens. The tragic story of Shaquila Weatherspoon is not just a case file. It is a profound, heart-wrenching reminder of the silent battles fought behind closed doors. Shaquila was the embodiment of resilience, a devoted mother and a pillar of her community who lived in the suffocating shadow of possessiveness and fear. The most chilling lesson here is that violence often wears a familiar mask. Roy McKenna did not present as a monster to the world. He presented as a husband. This case exposes the lethal threshold, the thin, invisible line where domestic turmoil escalates into an irreversible tragedy. It also highlights the agonizing barriers to seeking help. Shaquila's own professional success became a cage, as the fear of losing her career kept her tethered to her abuser. We must learn to look past the surface of marital strife. We must foster a society where no one has to choose between their livelihood and their life. If you or someone you love is navigating a relationship defined by control rather than care, remember, silence is the abuser's greatest ally, but your voice is your greatest weapon. Let Shaquila's memory be a call to action, to intervene, to support, and to break the cycle before the shadows turn to silence.